Divine grace, Mandra Viskanabai, Charnadavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, Granthara Shrimadbhagavatam ki, their most merciful Lordship Shri Shriadakunja Vihari ki, Shri Jagannath, Shri Baladev Mani Subhadra ki, Shri Nataji, Shri Balagopa ki, Shri Gornitai ki, Go Prem. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembled. All glories to the assembly. All glories to the Lord and Spirit of Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya
Narayanam Namaskritya
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Naram Chaiva Narottamam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam
Tato Jayamudiraye
Tato Jayamudiraye
Nasta Praishu Bhadreshu
Nasta Praishu Bhadreshu
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya
Bhagavati Uttamashloke
Bhagavati Uttama Shloke
Bhaktir Bhagavati Naistaki
Bhaktir
Reading from Shrimadbhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 13, Text 54. Text 54. You chant it on Om Namo Bhagavate chant. Okay. Chittasano,
Chittasano,
Chitta,
Chitta,
Svasa,
Swasa,
Chittasano, Chitta, Svasa,
Chittasano, Chitta, Swasa,
Pratyarita,
Pratyahata,
Sat, Indriya,
Indriya,
Pratyarita, Sat, Indriya,
Pratyahata, Sadindriya,
Hari,
Hari,
Bhavanaya,
Bhavanaya,
Dvasta,
Vasta,
Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta,
Hari, Bhavanaya, Vasta,
Raja,
Raja,
Sattva,
Sattva,
Tamo,
Tamo,
Mala,
Mala,
Raja, Sattva, Tamo, Mala,
Raja, Sattva, Tamo, Mala,
Jittasano, Jittasvasa,
Chittasano, Chitta, Swasa,
Jittasano, Jittasvasa,
Chittasano, Chitta, Swasa,
Pratyarita, Sad Indriya,
Pratyahata, Sadindriya,
Pratyarita, Sad Indriya,
Pratyahata, Sadindriya,
Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta,
Hari, Bhavanaya, Vasta,
Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta, Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Jagannath, Jai Baladev, Jai Subhadra, Jai Shri Gomata, Raja Sattva Tamo Mala,
Raja, Sattva, Tamo, Mala,
Raja Sattva Tamo Mala.
Raja, Sattva, Tamo, Mala,
Please chant.
Chittasano, Chitta, Swasa,
Jittasano Jitta Svasa,
Pratyahata, Sadindriya,
Pratyarita Sandindriya,
Hari, Bhavanaya, Vasta,
Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta,
Raja, Sattva, Tamo, Mala,
Raja Tattva Manamo Mala,
Jittasano Jitta Swasaha
Jittasano Jitta Svasa,
Pratyarita Sarindriyaha
Pratyarita Sarindriya,
Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta
Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta,
Raja Sattva
Raja Sattva
Tamo Mala
Tamo Mala, Jittasano Jitta Svasa, Pratyarita Sarindriya, Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta, Raja Sattva Tamo Mala, Jittasana,
Jittasana
one who has controlled the sitting posture, Jittasvasa,
Chitta, Swasa,
one who has controlled the breathing process,
one who has controlled the breathing process.
Pratyarita,
Pratyahata,
turning back,
turning back,
Sat,
Sat,
6,
6,
Indriya,
Indriya,
senses, Hari,
Hari,
the absolute personality of Godhead,
the absolute personality,
Bhavanaya,
Bhavanaya,
absorbed in,
absorbing,
Dvasta,
Vasta,
conquered,
conquered,
Raja,
Raja,
passion,
passion,
Sattva,
Sattva,
goodness, Tama, ignorance,
ignorance,
Madha, Mala, contamination.
contamination.
Jittasano Jittasvasa Pratyarita Sarindriya Hari Bhavanaya Dvasta Raja Sattva Tamo Mala. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace of I Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. One who has controlled the sitting postures, yogic asanas, and the breathing process can turn the senses toward the absolute personality of Godhead and thus become immune to the contamination of the modes of material nature namely mundane goodness, passion, and ignorance. Please repeat. One who has controlled the sitting postures,
One who has controlled the sitting postures,
the yogic asanas,
the yogic asanas,
and the breathing process,
and the breathing process,
can turn the senses
can turn the senses
toward the absolute personality of Godhead,
toward the absolute personality of Godhead,
and thus become immune
and thus become immune
to the contaminations
to the contaminations
of the modes of material nature,
of the modes of the material nature,
namely mundane goodness,
namely mundane goodness,
passion,
passion,
and ignorance.
and ignorance.
One who has controlled the sitting postures, the yogic asanas, and the breathing process, can turn the senses toward the absolute personality of Godhead, and thus become immune to the contaminations of the modes of material nature, namely mundane goodness, passion, and ignorance. Purport. The preliminary activities of the way of yoga are asana, pranayama, pratyahara, jhana, dharana, etc. Maharaj Dhritarashtra was to attain success in those preliminary actions because he was seated in a sanctified place and was concentrating upon one objective, namely the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. Thus all his senses were being engaged in the service of the Lord. This process directly helps the devotee to get freedom from the contaminations of the three material modes of nature. Even the highest mode, material mode of goodness, is also a cause of material bondage. And what to speak of the other qualities, namely passion and ignorance. Passion and ignorance increase material propensities of hankering for material enjoyment, and strong sense of lust provokes the accumulation of wealth and power. One who has conquered these two base mentalities and thus raised himself to the platform of goodness, which is full of knowledge and morality, cannot also control the senses, namely the eyes, the tongue, the nose, the ear, and touch. But one who has surrendered himself unto the lotus feet of the Lord, Hari, as above mentioned, can transcend all influences of the modes of material nature and be fixed in the service of the Lord. The Bhakti Yoga process, therefore, directly applies the senses to the loving service of the Lord. This prohibits the performer from engaging in material activities. This process of turning the senses from material attachment to the loving transcendental service of the Lord is called pratyahara. And the very process is called pranayama, ultimately ending in samadhi, or absorption in pleasing the Supreme Lord, Hari, by all means. Om Jnanatmarandasya Gnanjana Salakaya Chakshusha Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Now, I was looking here in chapter 29, symptoms of love of Krishna. Expression of love for Krishna. This is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In chapter 29, written by Srila Rupa Goswami, there are more bodily symptoms which express everlasting, ecstatic love. They are devoted as 33 as follows: disappointment, lamentation, humility, guilt, fatigue, and intoxication. No, that can't be. Intoxication, yes, intoxication. Pride, Krishna. Hard to see even with glasses on. Doubt, apprehension, intense emotion, madness, forgetfulness, disease, confusion, death, laziness, inertness, harshfulness, unmentalment, remembrance, argumentativeness, anxieties, thoughtfulness, endurance, happiness, eagerness, violence, haughtiness, envy, impudence, dizziness, sleepiness, and alertness. These are expressions of love for Krishna. I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time reading these easily. My glasses are not sometimes. My eyes don't adjust properly, and I need different kinds of glasses. When one is forced, this is disappointment. Now, all these that I've named, we've all experienced in life. But in the ways we have experienced them have been directly related to our involvement, for the most part, with the material energy. And so this is expressing that we will express as separation of love, with love of Krishna. So now we were talking of disappointment. When one is forced to act in a way which is forbidden, or to refrain from acting in a way which is proper, he becomes regretful and thinks himself dishonored. At that time, there is a sense of disappointment. In this kind of disappointment, one becomes full of anxiety, sheds tears, changes bodily color, feels humility, and breathes heavily. You've seen me have this before. When Krishna, in punishing the Kaliya serpent, appeared to have drowned himself in the poisonous water of the Yamuna, Nanda Maharaj addressed Yasoda Devi thus: "My dear wife, Krishna has gone deep into the water, and there's no longer any need to maintain our bodies, which are so full of sinful activities. Let us also enter into the poisonous water of the Yamuna and compensate for the sinful activities of our lives." This is an instance of severe shock, wherein the devotee becomes greatly disappointed. This is by Nanda Maharaj himself. But see, that which would normally be turned towards a child, when it's turned towards Krishna, then it becomes an experience of ecstatic love. When Krishna left Vrindavan, Subal, his intimate friend, decided to leave also. While leaving, Subal was contemplating that without Krishna, there was no longer any pleasure to be found in Vrindavan. The analogy is given that as the bees go away from a flower which has no honey, Subal left Vrindavan when he found that there was no longer any relishable transcendental pleasure there. In Dham Kelly Kamudi, Srimati Radharani addresses one of her friends in this manner. My dear friend, if I cannot hear the glorious activities of Krishna, it's better for me to become deaf. And because I am now unable to see him, it would be good for me to be blind, a blind woman. This is another instance of disappointment due to separation from Krishna. Japate video in here. There is a statement in the Hari Bhakti, in the Hari Vamsa, wherein Sarvabhauma, one of the queens of Krishna in Dwarka, tells her husband, Satyabhauma, my dear Krishna, since I heard Narad glorifying Rukmini before you, I can understand that there is no need of my talking about myself. This is an instance of disappointment caused by envy. Rukmini and Satyabhauma were two wives, and because Krishna was husband of both, there naturally was some feminine envy between them. So when Satyabhauma heard the glories of Rukmini, she was envious of her and thus became disappointed. Normally, amongst boyfriends and girlfriends, when this disappointment is felt, it's on the mundane level. But when it's directed towards Krishna, then it becomes a transcendental experience. So see, similarly, there's this distinction as well in Bhakti Yoga. The ultimate aim for all these asanas is not help for the health of the physical body, even though it's a fringe benefit. The aim is for us to be able to find a suitable place where we can actually meditate without the mind being troubled by any external set of circumstances, so that we can enter into ultimately samadhi, as it says. But there's deep trance that we can have the experience of here that we will have before we enter into samadhi, that is the real experience of the description being given of our removal from everything in the material world. So when you're hearing the name of Krishna's name, and you're meditating on its sound, and in your heart you're asking Krishna to engage you in his service, in that spiritual energy of Krishna's, then the experience there is of a transcendental nature. It will be. And as the soul continually engages in that activity, the realization becomes more and more realistic. And so the appreciation then increases, of course, because with the happiness that's derived from knowing the experience and from the relationship, this is what Sudam is affected by. This is all because of their relationship with Krishna. And so this is our day-to-day experiences. In everything we're doing, we can be filling our day with that can be enabling us to have those spiritual experiences. Or we can be running away from Krishna, trying to find some pleasure in this world. That it's giving us the opportunity to know the difference between the mundane the so-called goodness. Srila Prabhupada makes a statement here, so-called goodness. So, in society, there are certain activities that are looked upon by the common general populace as what we would say might be the mode of goodness. Feeding hungry people, providing necessities for those that are in need, clothing the poor, donating to welfare organizations that are for that purpose. These kinds of activities, although they are looked at by the populace as the mode of goodness, they are nevertheless tainted, because those members of society that are in those situations of life that have brought them, the acts that have brought them to that stage of life, in most cases, because there are some who choose to be poverty-stricken, but in most cases it is by sinful activity that a soul is brought, and it is by the development of the desire to enjoy the things in this world that are not ours to begin with. The earth is the Lord's, and that means everything in the earth. We can use everything. Utility is the principle, and that means everything that there is that we have access to be able to use in this world, we should engage it in that spiritual activity of the Supreme Person, whether we're driving a car to a site to do chanting, or to do book distribution, or to be distributing prasadam. These kinds of activities that are of a glorious nature, that bring liberation to the general populace at large. We are enhanced by our ability to use machinery and things in this world that have been developed, and all the people that have been giving their lives, devoting their lives to the creation of these inventions. They get some benefit as well for the aid that takes part in that spiritual activity. So the difference between feeding someone food that has not been offered to Krishna is taking from what does not belong to us as a thief and giving it to another person to engage in this act of thievery that we are engaged in, and then we eat it and become guilty of the death that some form of life had to experience for us to be able to continue our life here another day. As compared to when a spiritually minded person, fully engaged in the transcendental activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, takes what he knows is not his, but in his mind, he is making a statement of that belief by taking what is being offered from the earth and offering it to the one from whom it came, and acknowledging that this is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that he is the one who gives us the ability to control the senses, but it is by the application of his teachings that the senses can be controlled. So we are not qualified to be in a position to give other people knowledge until we are ourselves in control of our own senses. And it is by the taking of this only into our bodies that is of a spiritual nature, that we find that qualification as stated in the Bhagavatam, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita. So, when we come to the standard of recognizing that everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we develop that mentality, Krishna gives us the means to become free from the effects that using these things would otherwise cause us to have to suffer for. The thief has to pay for his suffering, even though he may think nobody's looking. The cameras are not on now. But the laws of karma are always on. So there is no escape from the laws of God. This is the mentality of man, human beings, thinking that they can escape from God's laws. And all their daily activities, for the most part, even those engaged in Congress, those engaged in the most high offices of the courts of the lands, if they are not themselves qualified to be in those seats of positions that they are supposed to be qualified to hold, they're going to have to suffer severely for taking positions without authorization from the Supreme, who appoints those positions himself. And if the courts have no presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, where is the appointment? There are no appointments. Democracy, in and of itself, is described by Srila Prabhupada as being demon crazy. And what is meant by that is the overall population is not going in the direction that humankind is meant to go in order to fulfill its purpose in life, to find that eternal dwelling after this life. So the soul that has full knowledge of its eternal purpose doesn't see this life in and of itself the only experience life is going to be. There's a future to look forward to that is of a completely different nature than any experience this world has to offer. And we will only come to that place, that environment, if we engage in the activities with the proper attitude and proper mentality required to gain entrance into that eternal city, Krishna Loka. That eternal city where every tree can provide any kind of food, where every living entity is in full knowledge of its eternal relationship to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Just the touch of such beings, their whole bodies being made of bliss, ecstatic bliss, a substance, the experience of which far beyond exceed that which we consider to be that orgasmic pleasure experienced in union, dependent upon another soul to give us that. And the whole body is made of a substance that offers that superiority of experience of pleasure and happiness all the time, just by its nature of its being. It's kind of gross to put it into those terms, but that's the nature of the superior substance the self is made of. And then in order for the self to experience that, Krishna is describing an entire lifestyle to engage ourselves in, to study from eternal principles, to share friendship with those only who are interested in those eternal principles of the Supreme, who will eventually also live in the eternal cities that are far removed from this material universe, which we have record of in Shrimadbhagavatam. We're learning a lot about the qualities of Yudhisthira Maharaj. Let me get back to the verse again and repeat. One who has controlled the sitting postures, the yogic asanas, and the breathing process can turn the senses toward the absolute personality of Godhead and thus become immune to the contaminations of the modes of material nature, namely mundane, goodness, passion, and ignorance. So, specifically as well, this is pointing out that the transcendent nature is beyond anything in this material world, even that looked upon as goodness. This watch band is not functioning properly. What we have to come to the conclusion of is the value of the experience of the eternal. Because without that, there's no real force for us. It's like it is said that the people need a vision. Without a vision, the people perish. So, without a flavor, without a taste, to replace the mundane, people are left with only that the mundane has to offer. And so we're constantly at search for that which is satisfying. Whereas, when the devotee has the mentality, how can I find a means of the Supreme Person finding pleasure with me? And when we keep that mentality, this is the means Krishna is saying to find the absolute experience of pleasure and happiness in our minds. Not looking for our own, but looking out for the benefit of the Supreme Person. And in directing our energies in that way, our energies are increased. So in this way we are moving all of our concentration towards us with these sitting asanas are based on the ability to turning the senses towards the Supreme Person means concentrating the mind, concentrating all the senses of the physical body to be immersed in that substance that the soul is and that substance that the Supreme Person is, so that together in this one body they manifest as a spiritual force. We are manifesting as spiritual forces in this world as individuals completely apart from the energy of this world. And Krishna is revealing to us in each of these principles that he lays out in these teachings the means of being able to be those vessels of his energy. And experience it. It's not just something for us to do, but something for us to do and experience. And in this way, love becomes the motivating factor. Love from within us, which we know is for us, but now because we have this love that we are experiencing for us, we want everyone else to know what it is. If you're experiencing such a great force of love yourself in all your activities, your daily life, how can you want to go out and do harm to anybody? You know? How can you want to go out and make bombs or find out ways of causing suffering for human beings? No. We want to give that treasure that we have found that increases in the giving. That is the treasure of life we found, Supreme Person sharing this body with us, the knowledge of which is that great treasure. All the Brahmins hold in their hearts as the highest treasure to be found in human life is that communion with the Supreme Person, that loving exchange. When any situation is confronted, it goes beyond the ability of the participant who is surrendered to the Supreme, who has turned their attention toward the Supreme, that when they confront any situation whatsoever, they know the Supreme is in control. And they have no fears. All doubts have been washed away. All unreadiness, because the acts of Krishna automatically bring us to a state of preparedness for whatever may come. Because our minds are engaged in spiritual energy, automatically our bodies are going to engage in those activities that are of that spiritual nature, and that is eternal. And that's why Krishna is encouraging us to do this constantly. Without end, the singing of the holy names, to experience the totality of the love of God that we are capable of experiencing. We have to develop that love in our hearts to sing Krishna's names, to hear and to speak them in such a way that would be pleasing for Krishna to hear them, which mostly is by the life that we lead, mostly by the activities that we engage in through the day. So all of that singing that we do of Krishna's name is revealing to Krishna those feelings we're having towards him in those activities that we're engaging in. So there should be happiness there as well. But separation is in and of itself described as a form of ecstasy. So this is not easy to understand in the material world, because normally we think of separation as that which is the cause of our pain and suffering. So, see, this pursuit the soul has when it comes to find out who is that perfection of love, then we know the answer is always there. And then the question is always there to ask, whatever you may want to know. God is not limited in conversations you can have with him. But once you come to find out what is most pleasing conversation for him, then you aim your questions towards those subject matters that Krishna himself reveals are important to him by the words he's spoken himself in Bhagavad Gita, in Bhagavatam, and in his conversations with Yudhishthira Maharaj, like that. So, even when you approach the deity form of Krishna, you can approach him with questions in your mind. You'll find he fills your mind then with the answers to those questions. That's the great experience that we want everyone to know and have, is that there, Krishna is making all of this, that he intercedes with human beings to give them the means to experience the highest forms of consciousness and the freedom that the experience of freedom that disconnecting oneself from the connections of karma brings. Because when you're free from karma, then you have no fears of the future. And what to speak them with when your every activity throughout the day is engaging in activities that are contributing to that eternal force in this world that is giving itself to you, all human beings who will open themselves up to hear the truths about Krishna. Anyone who has a heart and a mind toward perfection of life, towards love of God, towards fulfillment of knowledge, and proper conclusions based on sound reasoning, then hear the words Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita. Dehinosmin yata de kumaram yoganam jara tatra dehandra traptir tirastatra namuyiti. A sober person is not bewildered by the changing that he's going through in this life, from boyhood to youth to old age. At the time of leaving this body, a sober person is not bewildered by the changing into another form of life, because all the life was dedicated to that very purpose. Krishna. We should be looking forward to that day with anticipation. What are we doing? Afraid to die. We were all afraid, running away from death. Oh no, I don't want to die. Die will mean the end. Not to a devotee. Dying is not the end. But Krishna even reveals he has power over death even to devotees. Even in the Bible it's revealed that. Enoch walked with God. Who was seen on a flaming chariot? Jeremiah, let me think. Joshua was seen on a flaming chariot, and he left off from this planet on a flaming chariot. This is what very similarly is described as that is circumambulating the dweeps that surround Krishna at the bottom of this universe. There is a chariot, golden chariot, that is driven by the sun god, that makes such a deep trench that waters can flow in it as a moat around all the waters of the Nile. Going to be here tomorrow? No. Sorry. He's coming up. And so we read in Bhagavatam of activities that are going on inside the surface of this universe. And it's so easy to think of those activities as being described as that which is going on in the material world. simultaneously as material activities that are being described, but because of where they're happening in many cases, it's not an ordinary soul that can even gain access to the inner surface of the universe on which Lord Vishnu will be residing for the continuance of the existence of the universe. And he has always been there, he will always be there through its existence. So as living entities now living on a little tiny planet inside, like a speck inside of this universe, we can realize, how fallen we are and how far away we are actually in a place where there's such thoughts can go through people's mind that there is no such thing as God. There are no such thoughts that go through the living beings who are on that inner surface of the world. Because all they have to do is go to the shores of the causal ocean and see. So they are of a much more elevated nature than we are. And this consciousness that Krishna is causing us to come to is of the nature that will automatically bring us beyond those elevated. So just like we were comparing mundane goodness, quote unquote, mundane goodness, right, in the material world, to that which is actually spiritual goodness. Similarly, in the universe, by various dwellings that the inhabitants are able to dwell in, the activities will mimic the environment they've been put into. So when you get into an environment where there are such living beings who don't even believe there's an existence of a supreme person or laws that are being carried out by nature itself, then we're in a fallen place of existence. We have to come to that realization. And in order to be lifted out of that the mundane consciousness brings us into with pain and suffering, then we fill our minds with the eternal. And that is what this chanting will do for us. By simply concentrating on the eternal, the mind becomes free from the mortal. So it is by choice of the soul that we can either be experiencing at every moment eternal bliss, or all the suffering we bring upon ourselves by constantly, day in, day out, thinking about the things of this material world. What's happening in this part of the world? How many bombs they drop in that part of the world? How many automobile accidents happen on this street? How many people got murdered last night at midnight? How many robberies? How many banks were... All this crazy nonsense. We fill our minds with these things and then wonder why we have problems. When our minds are meant to be able to be filled with glorious activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that give us knowledge of the eternal platform, the mind can keep itself on for the rest of its existence, for the totality of eternity. The mind has access. And when we leave these bodies, they say you can't take it with you. The mind will go. So the mind that has been trained to accept those things that are favorable to the development of the soul, the perfection of the love of God of the soul, which we call bhakti or devotional service, then we accept that. And those things that are not favorable, then we reject that. And that makes life very easy. Simple living, higher thinking. Highest thinking. Because the thinking comes natural. By developing the attitude proper for the bliss to enter the mind, we have to be in a state of peacefulness towards all life, towards all other living beings. They're going to come by that when you have war on your mind. That doesn't mean you can't go to war to develop peace. But in order to be backed by God, we're going to take part in the activities that God is advising for us in this age to engage in, that He has set as a means for us. We can go about ways developed by other men that have success with the material energy. We will gain those rewards. But if we want to have the highest experience of love, then we have to turn towards the source of all love. And that's the original person, not a monkey. He's actually a person. We are becoming, as this age progresses, the human beings are becoming more and more degraded as a whole. And so we have to get to the stage of development of spiritual consciousness as a whole, to where, as a whole, we are expanding spiritually. And that will be love of God that will produce the best result. Any comments, any questions, any realization?
I was astonished by this mundane goodness, Prabhu. And tricky mundane goodness.
Yeah. See, out on the street are beggars. And it seems to be in the mode of goodness to give. And if you give spirituality, eternal spiritual truth to such a one, you benefit them spiritually, eternally. If you encourage them on the path of developing things in this material world, you're not going to help them, in fact, at all from the eternal perspective. So that which is just like the mind accepts and rejects, that which we can give to those that is an aid to engaging us in spiritual activities, we give. And that which is not helpful to spiritual activity, we don't give. So, to a person who does not know what is beneficial to spiritual activity, that may pose a question. But food, which is not offered to God, is not giving someone freedom from the material energy, but actually creating with them a more binding force. Because the more we eat, the more we become, what can I say, indebted. So if you don't know how to offer food to God, then you're not worthy of receiving the charitable contribution. Then you go to the temple and take that which is called prasadam from the temple. That is where those who are in need can come. Srila Prabhupada said nobody should be hungry within 10 miles of the temple. So that means then we are responsible for feeding people within a 10-mile range. In my mind, it means there should be a temple within every 10 miles. So we have to get to that stage to cover the whole earth. Then everybody can become free and there will be nobody will be hungry. But more so than full stomachs, will be minds full of transcendental experience of eternal consciousness. That's the real goodness that we're trying to promote, is the transcendence of reality. And we don't know what reality is. We're trying to bring people to this understanding of what reality actually is. And everybody is thinking they know. They know. And they are all thinking they have the only way. And so, let's compare notes. But in order to do that, first you have to read our notes, our books. They are voluminous. But it is because they offer answers to every question you have. That's why we offer them freely and suggest if you have anything better, please show it to us. We'd like to know what you might have that's better than Krishna. And our declaration is there is nothing better than Krishna. There is no one better than Krishna. There are no better teachings better than that given by the Supreme Person himself. Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Shrimadbhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Their most merciful Lordship, Shri Radhakunda Bihari ki jai, Shri Jagannath, Shri Baladev, Maheshwara ki jai, Shri Nathaji, Shri Balagopal ki jai, Shri Gauranitai ki jai.